Prologue. The Visionary. Hadi Ismail, the youngest scholar in Lunasra's history, a man with great talents and a deft hand. If not for that fateful accident, he would be on his way to becoming a teacher at the academy, respected and looked up to by all scholars. However, his river of destiny still brought him to Morris Isle, where he will complete his journey. End of prologue. Chapter 1. The Accident. I am from Lunazra, second son of Red Dove City's lord, and Hadi Ismail is my name. In 3 days I shall embark on a perilous journey filled with danger and the unknown. Therefore, I decided to first record the previous chapters of my life in writing. It all began with the mineral called duosol. More than 80 years ago, the scholars of Lunazra's academy and the priests of the temple issued a joint declaration, an unprecedented event in the kingdom's history. Yet the contents caused even more of a commotion among the people. Dosol, once revered as a relic left behind by God, was reclassified as a common mineral. Consequently, the ban on its extraction was also lifted. Countless merchants, scholars, and craftsmen reveled as the news traveled. The city and its lords, the Ismail family, my family, the ones who have ruled the Red Dove city for generations, were immersed in festivity. The reason for it was simple. My home, Red Dove City, was situated atop a rich vein of Dusol. Human desires are boundless, and Dusol brought unprecedented prosperity to the Red Dove City, propelling the ambitions of my father and brothers to their zenith. Those very ambitions were what prompted me, who had been wading quietly into the river of destiny for 18 years, to plunge into its current. That day was probably the hottest one I can remember. The night before, I stayed up late with my father and brothers, entertaining wealthy merchants from Ecuria, and it wasn't until high noon the next day that I finally arrived at the meeting point with my mentor. The man was enjoying a lunch break. 2 eggs were cracked and spread evenly on a flat circular stone, and within moments, golden bubbles began to form on the surface, much like Dusol itself. From a cloth pouch, he took out some spices and sprinkled them evenly over the eggs. My stomach couldn't help but growl as the fragrant aroma wafted to my nose. Young master, have you not had breakfast yet? If it is not improper to offer, my teacher broke his meal into half and handed me a piece. Thank you, teacher, but I'm still feeling stuffed from the rich roasted lamb they served last night. I refused the meal and motioned for him to enjoy it himself. And please, don't call me young master. I will forever be your humble student. After finishing his meal, I was thanked graciously for secretly providing him with eggs and spices, sparing him the necessity of subsisting on cold and dry biscuits like the other slaves. But I didn't like being on the receiving end of his reverence. It was not I, but my master and people like him, those who are brimming with wisdom, who are deserving of such respect. Young master, today we will dig deeper underground to find a clean water source. The man's eyes, slightly clouded with age, gleamed with excitement. I hope it won't be contaminated by Dusol again. I extended my hand to my mentor, who gave a respectful smile as he accepted my help, pulling himself up with his hand on my forearm. I would never forget the sensation of his rough palm, because that would be the last touch my right arm would ever feel. We had to walk to the desert edge before we could spot the entrance to the well. I had seen it countless times on paper and in diagrams during my 3 years of study at the Royal Academy, but to witness its vast scale with my own eyes left me in awe. At least 100 people could circle the well, and that was just its periphery. This wouldn't have been possible if you hadn't written that letter to reason with the city lord, he told me as we descended, all the while offering caring reminders to watch my steps. Once we arrived at a certain depth, I was pointed to an opening. This is the fourth well we've dug. From the bottom of the pit, I was shown three other wells, located slightly higher up, guarded by sentinels. There was a sigh in his voice. The water from the first three was spoiled as Dusol had leached into it. The Lord has temporarily sealed them off so that more Dusol can be extracted in the future. They want to extract more? I could hardly hide my surprise. Yes, I'm sure this does come as a surprise, as you've just returned from the royal capital, but the Lord has come to an agreement with Ecuria's merchants to sell all the firearms we produce for the next few years. The most important parts of the deal, of course, are Dusol, in its unprocessed form, and the gunpowder refined from it. What about water? I blurted out. Large quantities of water had to be injected underground to fill the void created by the extraction of Dusol. This was to ensure that the surface wouldn't sink in as the material was taken out. The same method had been used by the city for over 30 years, a method gained from the wisdom and sacrifices of countless craftsmen and slaves. While Dusol had brought prosperity to the city, it had also exacerbated its water scarcity, already a serious problem given its location on the edge of a desert. The lord, the nobles, and the merchants, blinded by the riches and power brought by the soul, averted their eyes from its problems. Even my father and brothers. The potential wealth and power they could gain from Dusol, as well as the desire to surpass Lunazra's six great cities, even the royal city itself, had blinded them all with greed. In fact, I received even more horrifying news from my mother upon my recent return. My father and brothers were preparing for war with the other cities. I couldn't help but furrow my brow at these thoughts. Young master, look! My mentor's voice and the sound of grinding gears echoing in the cave interrupted my thoughts. By the time I realized it, we were already at the bottom. The slaves toiled diligently, turning the handles of the machinery, driving the gears that turned the chains, which in turn controlled the upwards and downwards motion of thick pistons, ultimately powering the auger that bore ever more deeply into the ground. As they drilled, the surrounding layer of soil gradually collapsed. Amazing! It was the first time I had seen the actual workings of this mechanical device since its design. The schematic you provided has made work much easier, young master, my mentor remarked as he returned to my side after inspecting the progress of their work. It's your knowledge that's most important here, teacher, I replied earnestly. Without knowing where to find water, any efforts to dig a well would have been in vain. This time, I intend to stay home so that I can learn the art of locating water from you. If it's knowledge you seek, you should venture eastward to Ecuria. Back in the day, had I chosen to journey east, my river of destiny might have flowed into even broader horizons. I knew that my mentor, a wise and learned citizen from Holoroth, was made a slave as a victim of war before being sold to Lunazra, eventually finding his way to Red Dove City. Recalling the stories he shared with me in the past, my hand couldn't help but shake as I ran my hand over the damp cave wall. It's coming up! Excited shouts interrupted my thoughts. I wiped the mud from my hands and rushed to the drilling site with my mentor. I could feel joy bubbling up inside of me, like a freshly emerging spring, as I saw clear water bubbling up from underground. This meant that Red Dove City would have several years without having to worry about clean water. However, just as everyone was celebrating, a series of unsettling sounds entered my ears. I separated from the crowd and placed my hand on the cave wall once more. It was vibrating. By then, the rest of the group had also sensed that something was amiss. Everyone exchanged glances before finally casting their gaze on my teacher and me. Beside me, a screw shot out from the iron frame of the machine that was fixed to the wall, ejected by overwhelming pressure. There was no time to think. I instinctively threw my right hand at the warped metal bar, desperate to hold it up. Run, the tunnel's collapsing! I shouted at my teacher, who was frozen in shock. Just then, a crack emerged on the cave wall. The slaves all ran for their lives, and my mentor had also finally come to realize the severity of the situation. Taking one last look at the water that was still spilling out of the ground, he rushed over to help me. Don't come, I'm losing strength. I stopped him from approaching. This place is going to collapse. Ah! Just as I was about to release my grip, rocks fell from the ceiling, crashing onto the supports. Bits of metal pierced through my arm, and the last thing I could remember hearing before my vision went dark was the sound of my own scream. At night, I was awakened by the excruciating pain radiating from my right arm. I tried to raise my right hand but found it utterly powerless. So I tried to sit up instead so I could examine the extent of the damage to my right arm. To my horror, I discovered that everything below my right elbow was simply gone. End of chapter 1.